bibliophiles and those raising bibliophiles. Today's book review is on Impossible Escape by Steve Sheinkin, and it's a true story of survival and heroism in Nazi Germany. I really enjoy Steve Sheinkin's nonfiction reads. He primarily writes nonfiction, so if you have a reader or you're trying to encourage some more nonfiction reading, he's a great author in that he presents the nonfiction in a way that seems like fiction. So he's a really good storyteller in that regard. His books are geared towards young adults, so sort of that teenage year, so you may want to use some caution. There is some profanity in some of his books, but those are in regards to quotes that he's taking of other people. That's not him as the author using those word choices. And so that's just something to be aware of if you decide to look into some of his books. But he has a great one last year, Fallout. Bomb is really popular of his. One of his favorites, one of his that I really enjoyed, that was one of my favorites, was The Notorious Benedict Arnold. I learned a lot from that. So he has a lot of great nonfiction reading, so he's definitely an author to look into. Impossible Escape is a World War II story. And in this story, we have two Jewish teenagers, Rudy and Gerda. And this is their real life experience as they are in Nazi-occupied Europe. Rudy and Gerda were originally schoolmates, and so in the turmoil of what's going on, they eventually sort of separate, but they do come together and find each other again later. And so he does give a little details about their later life, and at one point they do get married, but they do also divorce, and I'm sure the trauma that they experienced during World War II probably related to some of that relationship conflict that they had to work through. Regardless, the story really centers around, for the most part, what they experienced. And so Rudy ends up in Auschwitz, and he miraculously survives for 2 years. So if you've done any research about Auschwitz, you know that that's sort of an amazing feat in itself. And it really is benevolent encounters and just some ingenuity on his own that allows him to survive. He does eventually escape Auschwitz, and his goal is to really tell the world what's going on. This is when the crematoriums are taking place, and they're continuing to build more and more for those purposes. And so his goal is to really get out there and let everyone know what's taking place and what's going on. And so in that, he does escape, and he's able to tell everyone what's going on with the mass annihilations with the gas chambers. And he eventually does start to fight with some rebel soldiers who are going against the Nazis in that regard. During his story, the story does go back and forth a little bit. Gerda, she is in Hungary with her family as they separate and try to flee Slovakia and the Nazi occupation that's taking place there. Gerda has a really hard time, and so she offers like a unique perspective at the time. So she understood what was going on with the Nazis, and so she was very troubled by the fact that here she is in Hungary and people are not seemingly concerned. They're going on with their everyday life and laughing and going to school and all these things. So she really falls into a state of depression, and it takes her some time before she's able to sort of work through that. Eventually, she is taken by the Nazis. She and her mother are taken, and she has to make a decision. There's an opportunity at which she can escape. They're left alone cleaning an office, and Gerda takes that opportunity, and as a result, she does end up leaving her mother behind. And I don't believe she ever, if I remember correctly, she doesn't see her mother again from that encounter. So the Holocaust in general, I mean, obviously any story, if you've read a lot of Holocaust stories, they are not easy to read. And so there are aspects of this story that are difficult to read. Just the trauma that so many are faced with. But these stories do need to be retold and shared multiple times. So that way our modern sensibilities and this illogical reasoning that these types of things can never happen again need to be continually shared so we can recognize what's taking place in the world. The book is recommended ages 12 to 18. I do agree with that sort of recommendation. On the younger side, you may want to use caution. It is a Holocaust story. We are talking about people in the crematoriums being burned and the gas chambers themselves and sort of the trauma and fear that Rudy and Gerda are personally experiencing and telling. So you may want to consider that if that might be a little much for your reader. Additionally, one of the things I do love about Sheinkin is that he doesn't hide away from and the atrocities of things that happen, but he also isn't gruesome in the retelling. So that's another aspect to take into consideration, that yes, he's telling these horrific stories, but he's not graphic in their detail. So something to be aware of. The word bastard does appear several times throughout the book. Again, that is not the author using that term. That is quotes of what soldiers and other people have been saying. And so I just want to make you aware in case word choice or profanity is a concern for you, that does appear. One of the things I really did like about the book, there was a quote that says, "Unless you've been faced with the decision to do this or die right now, you can't possibly know how you would respond." And I think that's an amazing quote and something really to consider. A lot of time we hear stories in various situations, whether it's Holocaust or others, and people have this righteous indignation of you should have done or I would have done. And we really need to consider the trauma that people have faced, and we can't possibly know how exactly we would respond in those similar situations. And so there's a lot of good quotes and things to think about with this book. I will share some of those with the video in the notes, so feel free to check those out. Again, if you're looking for a nonfiction read, I definitely recommend Steve Sheinkin. I really enjoyed Impossible Escape by him, and I couldn't put it down. I was really captivated by Rudy and Gerda's story, especially as he goes into details after the fact and what happened to them later in life.